Good morning, everyone.
Good morning.
Many years ago, when we were down in the barnyard and had offices down there, someone made an appointment to come see me. His name was Gary Richman. And he sat down and we started talking, and it was like I was looking in a mirror. I mean, our minds were identical, just amazing. And for years, we had a radio program on the peninsula where we would sit and discuss topics that were about the mind, about the heart, about spirituality. And it was a delightful experience because never once in all those years did we ever rehearse anything.
Still haven't.
Still haven't. You can be sure this is a spontaneous event. And yet, the concepts that came out, the understanding, was just amazing. And very often we've gone back and listened to those again and again because things came out that surprised us too. So today, when we got together, we thought, well, what should we talk about? And the idea that came up finally worked itself around to the topic of the hub of the wheel. Now, what is that about? Well, believe it or not, that's not a wheel you're looking at. That's the plaza in Rome, right in front of St. Peter's. So you have to see it from the sky to realize it's a wheel. Like the Nazca lines, got to see it up here. The idea of the hub of the wheel is what is the most important part of life? The wheel has been a traditional symbol, not just in Buddhism, but in many, many traditions. Over the thousands of years we have records. And always it's a spoked wheel with a rim. That's a beautiful one there. I believe that's Indian. And what is it trying to tell us? Ancient symbols were designed to be passed on for millennia. They really thought about that when they were creating them. How do you get something across to people who are going to be here thousands of years from now? Well, they do it a lot with geometry, and this is what's called sacred geometry. A circle is the only geometrical shape that's found in nature. And the spokes, that's interesting. There's another one, it's on your order of service. Beautiful. Something's going on in that hub. So I thought today we would talk about that and share ideas about what is this symbol. A big hint, of course, is that you find it in the major spiritual traditions. It's talking about the mind. The mind is being pictured as a wheel. Many spokes, many things coming out of one center. The interesting thing about a wheel is that every point on the wheel moves except the center. The center doesn't move at all. So, let's find out what it's about. Gary?
Well, I thought I'd start with a play on words of the fact that this is the Center for Spiritual Awakening. And what we're going to talk about today is the Center to Spiritual Awakening. And it's about that center in terms of what many people have come to talk about. And more people are actually finding that this is, in essence, the hub of their talk. If you remember when I spoke here 2 years ago, I talked about deepening, and I was already talking about that from my own work. And then Miranda McPherson came last August, I think, and she spoke about that she is changing the vernacular of her talks to more about deepening and centering, and gave us an example of when she was camping with her husband. And then Adashante came and talked also about stepping into the vulnerability of the self and coming to meet yourself in that center and really talk about what that's about. And so for me, the word that keeps coming up is that center of the wheel is vulnerability. The very essence of our authentic self. Dr. Rick, who used to be here, talked about the wounded child and the adapted child. The adaptation is what I call the spinning that we all do because it's so hard to sit in that authentic self because we've never been honored or validated for that. And that you actually need someone to sit with you and teach you that. It's not something you can do on your own. But that vulnerability of the essence of our authentic self is so dangerous for us to drop to, because so few of us, and I literally mean few of us, have had any experience with that in terms of really being honored, to be truly vulnerable and accepted and honored and held.
You know, from the point of view of physics, the wheel and its turning and so forth is a very complex operation. The mathematics of it is amazing. Let's say you're out at some point on the wheel of your mind, you know, on a spoke out here somewhere. And maybe, like most people today, your mind sort of gets distracted and shifts over to another idea, maybe something that's going to happen soon, so you want to leave one spoke and go to the other. The mathematics of changing from one spoke on a moving wheel to another spoke is ridiculously complicated. Why? Because you're starting out on a moving thing, you're going to another moving thing, which is moving while you're going. Get the complicated, you know, it's not easy. But we think we can do it, and we try to do it millions of times a day with not much success. However, if you somehow could be located at the center of the wheel, just right there at that hub, at that point, you can see everything on every spoke simultaneously. It's a very strange phenomenon, but it happens to be true. A wheel has messages contained in it. We all say, I was talking to someone just the other day, how she was saying how glad she was for the wheel. I think it was Reverend Kim. Is she here today?
Yep.
There she is. She was saying she was actually doing treatments thanking God for the wheel because she moved her whole apartment from one place to another. And without wheels, it would have been a nightmare. But the truth is, the wheel has a spiritual message to it, and that is, find that center. And then you'll be amazed. Then the whole mind is accessible. What does that mean? Well, Gary was just talking about how important it is to have help to find the center, because we're not used to it. We were used to it to begin with. We came in as children. We were the center at that point, but we didn't know it. And the world comes in and changes us, and we lose that center. Yes, it is very important to have help, absolutely. This is why the great teachings and teachers emphasize this so much. I'll go to Christianity to begin with. What did Jesus say? He said, I've got a Father within. I don't do anything, only the Father does it. He's describing an inner experience that he personalized as a father. Now, you know, the traditions is personalized in different ways, but the idea is to have an intimacy with a being that represents your center. You find that everywhere. That's in every tradition. Not only in Buddhism, you find it in Hinduism, Taoism. For Lao Tzu, I would say that the wheel was replaced with the idea of the river flowing. Get back into the flow, the natural flow that you're not creating, and flow with it. You know, it's a kind of intimacy with the river there. Yeah. This is unavoidable in spiritual teachings. As far as the spiritual teachers are concerned, this is what it's about. It's about finding that stillness. We do have a video, I think. We'll see. It shows a person making a wheel. And it's a wooden wheel, and it's very large. The hub is gigantic. And I don't know if you've ever seen someone building a wagon wheel, but let's take a little look at it. See, that hub is enormous. The spokes were actually hammered into the hub and glued. And then at the end, look what happens. A drill comes in there to drill a hole for the axle. Meaning that the real hub of the wheel is nothing. It's nothing at all. It's space. Now this is what's so fascinating. Adyashanti, you mentioned him a few minutes ago. He used to say, the only real question is, how long will it take you to reach stillness? the stillness at the center of the wheel. Because if you reach that, then so many things will unfold naturally.
Yeah, we grow up with such a sense of taking centeredness for granted. How many of us baby boomers were growing up in the late 60s, 70s reading Eastern texts, and centeredness was the word of the day? And yet, what does that really mean? And I get torn between your issue of the inside of the wheel out or the issue of children, because they're both so similar. So many of us run the outside of the wheel. We live outside in. We live with overcompensating for insecurities and difficulties. And how does that show up? Jealousies, envy, arrogance, anger, withdrawal, substances, acting out behavior, because it's so hard as a way of compensating and attempting to survive the real inner issue of dropping to that, in some respects, painful place of centeredness, where actually our own sense of difficulty and emptiness lives. And we do all this defense work to offset, because no one's really, again, invited us to seriously sit with our emptiness and know that it's okay. When we look at children, all of you who have raised children, when they're 4 years or younger, what do you see? You see them go in and out of feelings all the time, from insecurity to curiosity to joy to hunger to fear, back to curiosity, back to joy, back to fear, and looking to you not only for the honoring and validation of that, but for the support of that. And as we grow up, we start to learn that that's not acceptable. We have to get tougher and harder and get over it and be all the things we need to be, not to look too quote-unquote weak. And yet, it causes us not to come back to our own center, because that's really the place of inside out. Your analogy of the wheel is great, because if we sit in the center of the wheel of self, we see ourselves. When we're running on the outside of the wheel and getting bumped by spokes, we have no sense of that center and really who we are. Just, are we accepted? Are we included enough? Are we liked? Are we going to get promoted? Are we going to be appreciated? Are we worth cherishing? Instead of just knowing we are, which is part of that place. And the hard part of that we talked about is that you have to sit with that really difficult and painful place first, because that's what the defenses and running around was built up about. And for me, it was my own sense of growing up very alone and dealing with a lot of shame. And we all have ways of being unrequited love, or shame, or judgment, or feeling left out, or not seen or not heard. And that's the place that is underneath all those defenses and running around, the spokes, so to speak. And if you can drop in there, it opens up a vast arena of all the rest of who we really are in that authentic place.
Beautiful. You know, you're talking about how we're changed from the very innocent state, spontaneous state. Anyone remember when it finally dawned on you, you're perhaps getting close to high school graduation or something, that you would have to go out and make it on your own? You remember the feeling of that? What's the emotion of that? It's called fear. Right. That's right.
Though it's a joy to leave home and parents behind.
Well, and their joy at you going, right?
Yeah, exactly. It's a win-win.
As Gary was talking, the picture that came to my mind was my granddaughter, who's just turned 2. And for the first year, I would go and visit, and she would go through a dozen emotions in about 2 minutes.
Exactly.
Look at your parents. Is what I did okay? Yeah. And then music on the television. Oh, let's dance. And it switches from one to another. And it's just astonishing. In some sense, we're meant to be that way. Excuse me. We're meant to experience life moment by moment, without rehearsal, without reviewing, just present. That's beautiful. So for me, the real question here is, how do you get there? How do you get to the center when you're an adult and you're way off on a spoke somewhere, or the rim maybe, who knows? You know, when Maren and I were looking for videos and pictures, we thought, okay, let's get a picture, YouTube usually, of a wheel whose hub has broken and the spokes are separating, and of course it collapses. We couldn't find one until she suggested looking at pottery. Now, let's watch what happens here. Potter, of course, there's no center inside that vase that the potter's making, right? But there is, because the potter puts his hand in there to hold it up. Huh? Let's see what happens under some conditions. It's called a collapse, right? And we know that mind can collapse, right? It actually does happen, excuse me. That under certain conditions, he was kind of distracted there. What happened, he had his hand inside, and then he found some sort of rim generating itself, so to speak. So he took his hand away from the connection to the inside hand and went down to change that. That's where it lost it. And that's why it collapsed. Okay, can that happen in the mind? Yes. If we're separated long enough to the point where we think it's natural not to have a center, and we'll just take care of these things out here the way the world says we should, and so we'll find ourselves going into a kind of craziness. Now, there are many degrees of that. You know, sometimes we have a complete collapse. Sometimes we just have a kind of neurotic sense of mind, busy all the time, no sense of peace, stress. And there's a range of things that can happen. But yes, without a center, there's a collapse. So the question is, how do we get to the center? What do we do? I'm going to start with something that sounds like physics, and it is. But it does help, I think. People have described the center as being eternal. That's interesting. Eternal. Meaning timeless. That's what eternal means. Timeless. When you last for all time, you're timeless. Okay. Could there actually be a part of us that's timeless? Well, in the last 100 years, physics has gotten to the point of what's called relativity, general relativity. Einstein, a little over 100 years ago, brought forth this general theory. And people kept asking him questions about it. And they said, well, okay, the speed of light is a constant for all observers. That's kind of weird. There's a speed limit in the universe. And nothing that has any mass can go faster than the speed of light. But every observer, no matter how fast they're moving, will see the speed of light to be the same speed. So the question that was very quickly arose. People said, what happens if you travel at the speed of light? Well, of course, no physical being can do this. But the answer that Einstein gave, and it's true, is that time would stop. If you have a watch on, it stops. I mean, a physical watch will stop if you travel at the speed of light. That's it. Time stops. When time stops, there is no time. If there's no time, you're eternal. So am I suggesting that we travel at the speed of light? Well, we can't in this body. This body has mass. Can't do that. There's no way to do that. But we have other bodies. This is not the only body. Do we have a light body? Yes, we do. How many meditators do we have? Have you perceived your light body? Sometimes it's perceived as a tiny little blue point. Yeah. That's light. Okay, that's nothing but pure radiant light. That travels at the speed of light because it is light. And it's eternal. So just to justify whatever else happens here today, yes, there is an eternal center in us. And if you haven't experienced it, try some meditation. At one point, a tiny little blue dot will appear. That's you. That's your light body. And you say, well, it's very far away. No, you just have to be quiet, that's all. It's not very far away, it's right here.
I'm smiling because this is fascinating. First of all, we do all experience that all the time. In fact, the clip we'll have from Peaceful Warrior will speak to that. But we all have gotten extremely passionate about something. Whether it's the pedantics of just writing a term paper that you're really into, or dancing or playing a musical instrument, or something you're passionate about, you drop into that timeless place. There isn't anybody, you're all nodding, there isn't anybody here who went like, oh my God, where'd the time go? 2 hours, 3 hours, can go by. Even if you're passionately, which kind of a yin-yang, involved in your computer, you still lose time because you're just so engaged that you're in that center spinning. And it's just, time goes by. But I was really struck by this pottery and the potter throwing. Because I'm going, oh my God, look at what he's doing. The only way to raise the bowl or the vase that he was doing was from inside the center. Did you see him raising? What do we do when we talk about spirituality? It's about expanding. He was expanding his work from the inside out. If he does it from the outside in, it's all messed up.
That's what happened, that's why it failed.
Yeah, and I thought the analogy was very cool, because if you're in your center but you're not quite paying attention, or you're not quite centered, what happens? The vase starts to break. What do we call that? Oh, I have a lesson to learn. I was sitting in my center, I thought I was expanding, and oops, something tugged on me and my vase broke a little. And instead of getting caught up on the outside in again of judgment and shame of ourselves, and not allowing that vulnerable place of, no, we're not perfect. None of us are wearing orange robes, as I often used to say in circle group. So the deal is, we're still imperfect beings. And so there will be the cracks. But instead of judging it and beating ourselves up, to just look and go, oh, I still have something else to learn. And then get back to putting our hand in the center and expanding the bowl.
Beautiful. Poetic.
It's cool.
Yeah. We're each other's greatest fans.
We are. We do this if none of you were here.
Really?
And Mary, we put it on video, you get it on the internet. So let's go back to a statement you made earlier, and that is the help that we need to get to the center.
Yes.
That's really important. Because modern people, Western people in our kind of a culture, we're so used to not being there that it seems like some sort of alien atmosphere. What is that? I can't pay bills and raise a family that way. And we have all these arguments of why we can keep away from this thing. Is there a black hole at the center of us? I'm sorry, I'm not going there. It's that kind of thing. Okay, so how do you get there? And this is what I was trying to indicate before, is that the great beings have said, get the help you need. Gary was saying a moment ago that we need to have a presence there that we can relate to. And in the presence of which we can be totally vulnerable. Use the word vulnerable.
And safe.
And safe. The reason why this is true is because the center is going to evolve us. It's not finished with us yet. Do you see? It created us to begin with, then we went off on our own, and here we are now, contemplating that maybe we need a little bit more growth, more health, more life, more creative ideas, evolution. Okay. It wants to evolve us. In order for it to evolve us, it's got to change us. And this is another reason why we run away from it. Change? Oh, no thanks. But the only way to this state that some people call ecstasy and bliss is to change. Change means letting go of the useless, letting go of the burdens that we've accumulated over the years, fears, shames, all this kind of stuff. So in the center, one has to be completely vulnerable. And the only way to be completely vulnerable is to feel totally safe. So whatever's in the center has to have those attributes. It's all-powerful. Does it know us? Far better than we know ourselves. Can it change us? Instantaneously. Do we trust it? Not to begin with. Not to begin with. Years ago, I had an initiation, and it was done by a man. His name was Muktananda. And right away, he showed me visually, during the initiation, that here is my father, physical father, gone, picture of him. All happened in the mind. Not hard to understand that. He's replacing father. Okay, that was fine at that point. I had felt his energy was pure love. Fine, that's it. That's all I need is pure love. I'll go anywhere. Well, I thought so. But for year after year, I kept avoiding him. I was obviously totally, I loved the man completely, but I wouldn't go near him. I wouldn't think about him. I wouldn't dwell with him. I wouldn't meditate on him. No. Why? Well, it didn't take much to figure it out. It took looking back at childhood. It took having some insights into other lifetimes and so forth. I did not do well with fathers. That was not my strong suit. Okay? Fathers and I never got along. Okay. So he wasn't the one to be in the center for me. Because I just wouldn't go there. I unconsciously would avoid him. Now things changed as the years went on, and now it's much, much better. But it took a long, long time to get past that barrier.
Yeah, so much of what you said is so essential, because it's not only that it's helpful to have a spiritual teacher or someone there who really can connect with us, but it's essential because of exactly what you said. It's like, how many of us have been in situations, whether it's friends or a romantic situation, where somebody tells you how much they really appreciate and love you, and you want to look at them and go, why? That why is an experiential. You knew intellectually and from all your experience, Muktananda was a great person to be with, but experientially, we don't trust. It's nothing to do with intellect. It's even nothing to do with personality. It's that deeper place of wounded child that doesn't know it has a right to be cherished. And so we don't feel safe, and it's a very dangerous place to go. Because if you go there by yourself, all you're going to feel is what created it. Shame and pain and sadness and alone. But when you have someone who sits with you in absolute safety and invitation to really bring you out from a compassionate and cherishing place, you start to regroup that experiential place to that I actually may have a right to be honored and loved. And over time, because you're so right about that, I remember actually, I hope he's watching, but Dr. Rick and I had that same thing. We were such brothers of another mother that we repelled each other for years. I mean, it must have been years. We kept saying, oh, we should have lunch, or wow, there's so much to talk about, or gee, we're at the same church, or this is before we ran the circle group. And we stayed away, and finally, we stepped over a portal that allowed us to feel safe enough to really find out what we needed to do and what was there for each of us. And it just bloomed into this place that was just it's great.
Yeah.
But we have to keep being invited with safety and cherishing to step into that vulnerable place and really experience acceptance. It's not an intellectual thing. We're all bright in this room. We could just, you just think, well, okay, I'll get it. It's just software. Nah, it's the hardware. It's much more.
Yeah. I'd like to just switch words a little bit here. What does vulnerability mean? It means that you are mentally and emotionally naked in front of this person, this being inside you.
And yourself.
Okay, and yourself, yeah. In other words, you feel absolutely free to feel any emotion. Anything can come up, as dark as it is. You're in the presence of light, and whatever the darkness is, let it come up. Let it come up. There's no filtering, there's no editing, there's no trying to be spiritual, there's nothing like that. This is a much deeper phenomenon than metaphysical stuff and all that kind of thing. You know, we have to learn that to begin with to even have the concept that this could be true. But this is not the way the experience is. It's not intellectual, it's not psychological. Your psychology is what's being changed. Okay? So you have that sense of just being present with a being that is pure light. And that being is yourself. It is your inner being. So people talk about this in California. We have all sorts of words: inner self, God, goddess, and so forth and so on. Okay, whatever words you want, but you got to be personal there with that being. Yeah. If you keep it as an intellectual concept, it'll just have some pleasant moments, and that's it. The actual change that goes on is alchemical, and it goes on when you bring darkness to light. Because the light, of course, dispels the darkness. But it's an alchemical kind of thing. You know, a lot of people think, well, if I go to see, quote, God, if I go into my closet, close the door, go to God, I better have something prepared to say. And so, no, better to say nothing. Because you're not going to do it. And see, here's another source of fear. We won't be in charge there. Yeah, we're not going to do the changing. We're not the ones who make the things change. We come as we are with all of our warts and everything else. And the inner being showers you with love as you are. It doesn't expect you to be perfect. It knows that you can't be perfect because it created you imperfectly. So any pretense of being perfect is just seen to be a pretense. And that's it. There you are with all the problems, all the unresolved issues, relationships, and all the rest. In the light. Now, what is it going to do with them? That's very interesting. You never know. You can't control it. It's alchemical.
And that place of prepared statement, that's again the spokes. That's again attempting to come across okay. Because we don't know, we just are okay. We hear it all the time at this center and many places, that we are an extension and a sense of God. That we are an abundant being where the universe is just waiting for us to get it, to give it to us. But it is being in that present sense of self, in that authentic place, which just like as I described about little children, you can be scared, you can spill your milk, you can giggle, you can want to hug. It's all about being in the present state. But we don't allow that because we've been brought up to be under this and judged. And so we don't sit in that authentic place. So even when you're going, how come I can't meditate better? How come I can't meditate longer? How come blah, 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 blah? It's all judgment. There's no getting up from that. There's just being stepped on from that. And to be able to sit in our authentic self, which is extremely difficult. We get glimpses of it. It's like, oh, it's gone. It's like, oh, there it is. Oh, it's gone. And it's so really difficult to stay in that present state of authenticity of self because it means we're imperfect and we get to have the darkness.
We're perfectly imperfect.
Yes. And what's sad is when we won't allow that, then we're doing our best dysfunctional dance to seem to be okay. And the deal is to sit in that authentic place because, as you said, if we don't name it, there was the Earthsea trilogy that Ursula Le Guin wrote, and what she talks about in one of the first books is about naming. And if we can't see the darkness, if we can't turn to the darkness, how can we name it? And if we can't name it, it doesn't dissipate. So it haunts us. And in fact, in the book, he's actually trying to outrun his darkness, which how many of us see that in life? I mean, it's just amazing to watch the play going on all the time in the world with everybody doing their role and their dance instead of being authentic. Because when we allow and name that insecurity, we think of it as being vulnerable in the classic sense, which means we're weak and going to be taken out, and they're going to take advantage of us, and they're going to put their foot on the back of our neck, and we're going to be hurt. But if we own our hurt, Eleanor Roosevelt said, no one has control of us we don't give permission to. And it is an unconscious permission. And if I walk in with my sense of being deeply alone and having dealt with shame, I am empowered to what I tell my patients is, you know what you want more of, and you know what you don't want anymore. Because if someone starts to even tease me, let alone take on more, I just look at them and go, that's unacceptable. That's just not okay. And if someone is cherishing and empathetic and wanting to nurture, I'm hugging, big time. People in this church know me, I'm a big hugger. It's like, and it's empowered. You know what you want, and there's no wiggle room. It's very clear, and you know what you don't want. And you know who to allow in that inner circle, and to have a serious, heartfelt, loving relationship with. And you know who you don't. How many times have any of you, there isn't a person in this room who hasn't somebody taken a verbal shot at them, they go, I'm just kidding. Don't be so sensitive. Yeah, if we weren't streaming, I'd say what I would say to that. But so I'll tell you what I tell people to say to that. There are two words that I love. One is, that's unacceptable. And the other one is, I have no interest in this conversation. I have no interest. And there's no wiggle room for that. People can't say, oh, you do. If I say it's unacceptable, it stops people in their tracks. They look at me like, what? I say, that's unacceptable. You don't get to talk to me that way. They're like, and either they get it or they walk away. Either way, I'm fine. Because I only want people who really can do that. But the only way, and that's what I talked about in my talk 2 years ago, I had to do a lot of my work. Because none of us want to sit in that experiential place of starting to move into that experiential place of center. That first has to be dealt with that hurt. Because that's why you developed all the spokes and the run around. It's not weak, it's not being negative. People say, why would you want to hang out in that? Well, I don't particularly want to hang out with it. But guess what? It is. It just is. And if we don't deal with what is, we're running around trying to be, this is going to sound too bad, but it's not good English, is not. Or am not. Because I am that.
Taking it.
Yes.
Yeah. I think the examples you're talking about are so good. All of us have been taught to defend ourselves, to avoid certain kinds of people and energy because it could be dangerous. In other words, we have what's called survival programming built into us. Whether it came from parents or it's just there in our biology, I'm not quite sure, but it may be a mixture of both. And you say, well, that's fine. I mean, that's why we survive as children, go into adults and so forth. It is fine. For that level of life, it's fine. But it's the very same process that prevents us from going in and greeting that inner self. Oh, it's different. Oh, it's going to change me. Oh, no. In other words, an unconscious process which is made to create our survival is actually now defeating our evolution. So we are perfectly imperfect. We, by design, have things that are flawed within us. And the inner self knows exactly what this is. It knows exactly how to change it. It made us this way. And you say, well, that's just, dreaming up some sort of godlike figure. It's not a dream. The point is, get it off the dream stage. Go inside and find the being that's right for you, the being that you feel absolutely safe with. And it will start looking at you, and it will start showing you certain things. It will show you patterns, it will show you events from the past, how you misinterpreted all sorts of things. All of these things will naturally happen, so that your mind can let go of its well-practiced habits of limiting you and contracting you and making sure you're surviving and so forth. And you become more, how did Emerson put it? You become a more public person. You become more radiant, more able to be in the world without fearing it, This kind of thing.
The hard part is that you have to have someone invite you, whether you are getting mentoring of how to dance or play an instrument or break boards in a martial art class or whatever it is, you need someone to show you that path. Even those who came across in covered wagons needed someone to show them the way. And then they could do it for themselves. But you have to have someone show you the way because it feels so dangerous. Everything about you's been taught that that place is unacceptable. And it's not unacceptable. As a mentor of mine once said, be the best and perfect person you can. Because it's all we got. But we can be great imperfect people if we own that center, but we have to allow that. And only, you can't cheerlead this in front of a mirror. You have to have someone really invite you into self, saying, I have a deep interest in you. I have a deep interest in knowing what you're about, what you feel. And I actually want to attend and give that to you. And I want that back in a very safe way.
Yeah.
And you have to really be invited slowly because that experiential place is going, this is a trap. That pool is full of alligators. Are you kidding me? I'm going to put a toe in there and come out with no foot. And it feels that way.
It does.
At first because we've been brought up to stay away from it. It's part of just a kind of normal socialization from, again, an imperfect society. It's really why we, the baby boomers, we broke out in the 60s. I mean, what were we going for? Oh, basic things. Unconditional love. Love. Peace. Connectedness. Cooperation. Oh. And our parents went like, why would you want that? What's the matter with you? And besides, cut your hair. It wasn't acceptable. So it was dangerous to have those basics. Basics. We have to learn to unconditionally love ourselves, and part of that is owning the tough stuff, the not so good stuff. And what I say to people I work with is, I know it hurts, I hate it. I hate it myself. I wish it would just go away. But it's been there a long time. It's part of that center of the wheel. And when I put my center into that bowl to expand the bowl, part of what I touch is the hurt. But part of what I touch is also greatness.
Mary, do we have the video on 7 years in Tibet? Okay. In this particular scene that you'll see now, we saw it a few months ago. Brad Pitt, who plays an Olympic athlete, is talking to the Dalai Lama, the present Dalai Lama, but he's a child. And look what he says.
Tell me a story, Henrik. Tell me a story about climbing mountains.
Ooh, that's one way to fall asleep. The stories bore even me.
Then tell me what you love about it.
But the absolute simplicity, that's what I love. When you're climbing, your mind is clear, freed of all confusions. You have focus. And suddenly, the light becomes sharper, sounds are richer, and you are filled with the deep, powerful presence of life. I've only felt that way one other time.
When?
In your presence, Kondo.
We need help. And that's what great beings are. They are the help. And there are many levels of help. But to reach out and ask for that help is extremely important. And this is, if you want to go back to Christianity, this is Jesus saying, first of all, you have to be born again. This is a rebirth process. And secondly, he said, love God with all your heart and mind and strength. And then he embodied this in his own story. And he said, I chose God to be my inner father. And I love my inner father, and my inner father loves me. To be a real Christian, you've got to go through this path. You always follow the leader. To be a real Christian, you have to have some divinity inside that you recognize and can relate to with more than just thought. There was a love relationship between him and his father. It was a heart relationship. And it was so beautiful and so unconditional that he felt completely safe and surrendered to the Father constantly. And then, just to be sure, he told a story called The Prodigal Son. Right? You haven't heard of it? Oh.
The prodigal what?
Son. You know the sun in the sky?
Got it.
Okay. The prodigal could not get home by himself. He had been in the far country of the mind far too long. Okay? His habits of thinking about the world were engraved in stone. He remembered the Father's presence in the Father's house, but he didn't know how to get back. And everyone thinks, oh, that's sort of a little, technique that you use in storytelling. No, it's not. It's the real core of the whole thing. What did he do? He cried out because he couldn't figure out how to get back. And the Father came and get him. So that whole process is allowing the inner self to take on a form so that you can relate to it with love. And that love frees you simply because it's the nature of love to free you. It's the cause of why you're here. You were created out of love. And that love wants to continue to create you and recreate you. It's a very simple thing. Not so easy to do.
And actually what you're saying that makes so much sense is when he cried out, he was being vulnerable. He dropped in to that core of authentic self.
Right.
And the Father showed up.
Right.
And one of the quotes you give that's great, and I use it all the time, is to enter the kingdom of heaven, you have to become like a child. What are we talking about? That child that allows his or her feelings in the moment, in the presence of self, without judgment or shame or second guessing, in that presence, to drop back to that authentic self. And when I was listening to the movie, and it was like, oh, because what Brad Pitt was saying was, when he drops into that blissful state, he's able to hear things so much more clearly. If we're on the hub of the spokes of the wheel, we're so involved with being accepted and included and liked and cared for, or allowed to stay even, that all we hear is, am I okay? We're starving to hear that. But if we drop into the hub, we hear everything. Because there isn't a sense of what needs to be. There's just a sense of what is.
Beautiful. And I think we're gone over time. I can see the administrator looking at me. Thank you so much. And I believe now we're going to have Lee come up and sing another song.